My name is Max Gagliardi, and this is the Talk Energy Podcast. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. This episode's guest is Levi Schmidt, the manager for GreenTech here in Oklahoma City. Levi and I go way back. We've known each other for over 15 years. We also have kids that are similar ages, and he lives not that far from me, and we get him together on the weekends for what we call Dad-urdays, where we all get together and hang out. So recently when I found out that he'd made the jump over to the energy industry on the wholesale solar side, I was very excited. Number one, just because we could talk about energy stuff. And number two, I just thought he'd be a great guest to have come on the podcast. Levi was recently tasked with starting up a brand new GreenTech distribution center here in Oklahoma. And you can imagine with all the crazy supply chain stuff that's been going on with the pandemic, it's been a tall order to get the business up and running. This episode is filled with discussions around the trends for the Oklahoma solar industry. We talk about the current supply chain constraints and how the pandemic has affected getting access to the critical components needed for solar deployments. And lastly, we talk about how technology in the solar industry has changed over the years and where Levi sees it going into the future. Hope you enjoy the show. The audio. I'm going to start casual and kind of hang out for a second. We don't have to launch right into the straight up podcast, man. Thanks for coming over and making this happen.
Cool, yeah.
It's fun doing a little. It's fun doing a little pod. We did a vlog. We've done a couple of vlogs, messing around with that, and that's been fun. Just doing the audio visual. It's fun stuff. We remember in high school when we used to do like the videos and stuff back in the day at the assemblies.
Yeah, the assembly.
What were some of the ridiculous ones that we used to do?
Well, it would just be like a normal video, and then just cause some kind of crazy pirate or like it was just a hijacking.
We would just figure out a way to make funny videos and like slip them into the assemblies. Somehow get it like into the assembly where people would be subjected to whatever videography that we wanted to. Who would edit those back in the day? Was it Walker?
I think it was Walker, yeah. But we were like moles for Pirate Club in Stuco, student council, just slipping in all that Pirate Club.
What was Pirate Club? It was what was the origination of Pirate Club again?
Oh, I think it started with September 19th being National Talk Like a Pirate Day. And we were getting real into that one year and then decided, man, we should need a club so we can do this year round.
Yeah, it wasn't a sanctioned club, was it?
Well, briefly, because we got a faculty sponsor, but then our application got denied or something, but we were having hundreds of people show up at those lunch meetings and chant pirate stuff.
We really, got the float into the homecoming parade.
That was a crowning achievement, I think, was getting our pirate float and the pirate ship going through the homecoming parade, jumping off, trying to board over their floats and just generally causing a pirate ruckus.
That was unsanctioned though, right?
I don't think we were supposed to do that. Yeah. We definitely were never invited back. That was the abrupt end to Pirate Club.
What was the float that we had to slow down or whatever to like let us in? Didn't we have like one float? We were like pump the brakes, so they stopped, and then we were able to like pull our float in.
I think it was one of those things they just wanted to avoid a collision. Like the pirate ship apparently is getting in here. Who's going to stop us?
Yeah. Those are good times. So it's been a while since then. So we've known each other since high school.
Yeah.
How long has it been since we graduated? 15? Not quite 15 years. 2005, so 16 years.
Yeah, 16 years, even longer.
Golly.
It's crazy how the time's gone, yeah.
Like the 10-year anniversary, not a lot of people went, but it seems like it wasn't even that long ago, but it was like 6 years ago.
Right.
It's nuts, but it's nice that we're in town. I see you frequently. We have kids that are similar ages, and that's nice. They get together.
It is nice,
another couple group of friends that get together with their kids, and I guess I'll launch into the official intro, but welcome to Talk Energy. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, Max. Absolutely, yeah.
So you're in the energy industry now. You've done a couple different things. We don't have to go into all. You've been some different career paths, but lately you've made the switch into the in the sunshine game.
Yeah.
How is it? Tell me about your company. Tell me about what you guys do.
So CED, Consolidated Electrical Distributors, they've been a big player in the wholesale electrical industry for a lot of years. They've got, I think, almost 700 locations now. But I went to work for them straight out of college. I did a management training program. I think the little company tagline at the career fair was the best company you've never heard of. Then Fortune 100 company, huge company all over the U.S. And nobody's ever heard of them. Yeah. But it's one of those things. We have kind of a customer base, which are installers, and they kind of interact with retail. Now GreenTech, we have about, I think 68 locations now. Oklahoma City, we just opened about a month and a half ago. So that's where I came in.
I didn't realize it was that recent that it opened up Oklahoma City.
Yeah. So it was one of those things. Whenever I left CED back in the day, I said, man, if you guys ever open a GreenTech here in Oklahoma, call me. And 6 years later, I got this phone call. They're like, hey, man, you coming back on board to start the GreenTech? And I'm like, well, heck yeah, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is Oklahoma, it seems like I'm hearing more and more about solar. We've got a lot of sun here. Also have a lot of wind. There's obviously windmills because you can see them. But I've read, and I don't know if this is true, but that solar is relatively underutilized here versus the amount of sunshine we get in comparison to other states. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. So kind of the story with Oklahoma, we have cheap energy here. When you go out on the coast and it's 22 cents a kilowatt hour plus.
Right.
It's just been kind of a financial game. So we've gotten to the point now that, on the residential side, if you have you look at like a 20-year to 30-year lifespan of a system, you're going to end up paying in that 6 to 10 cent a kilowatt hour, just depending on the equipment you have installed or whatnot and the specifics of your application. But, so when you look at California, even 10 or 20 years ago, when solar was more expensive then, it just made sense. So now when it's like, I can buy 25 years worth of power for 6 cents kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And normally I'm paying 22, 24. Hell yeah, that's a good deal.
Right.
Sorry about the profanity. I know.
It's a
family-friendly show here.
Nah, it's not that family.
Yeah.
People drop F-bombs on the show.
All right.
My wife is like, you better not. And I'm like, okay.
I can loosen up a little bit.
She's like, you better not. It's okay. All right, I'm going to adjust this camera a little bit. But no, so you're saying on the coast, it's a little bit more expensive. Here we got cheaper energy. I saw a chart today. I don't know if it's true, but it was ranking states on cents per kilowatt hour, and Oklahoma was really, really low. Like, I don't know if it was the lowest, but it was like 4.5, 5 cents, something like that. It got pretty low. And I don't know if that's real. You never know if you see these charts, but I'm sure at different times it's different. I don't know what the averages are, but
no, that's definitely Oklahoma. I don't know if we're in the bottom 5 for sure. And part of that, we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of infrastructure for it. We have a pretty favorable regulatory environment, oil and gas. And there's just a lot of reasons for that. But really, solar is just now financially sensible in our state because of the cheap energy. And that's something solar, when you look at the cost of the materials and specifically the PV panels, the cost has dropped like 90% in the last decade. So it's been a really tremendous and kind of quick, advancement as far as the production goes, which has really kind of accelerated the growth in the last 10 years. In Oklahoma, it's like one of the last states to bring solar around. And a lot of that is it is the cheap energy. That's a big part of it. And there's no, other states have, a little bit more robust of a rebate program or tax incentives, things like that, which Oklahoma doesn't have. But, I really don't think that's it's created a situation where right now when we're moving into a market, it's a completely undeveloped market. Yeah. It makes financial sense. We've got, financing options. So for me coming into it right now, it's like fantastic. Right. I love the way this has gone because it's just a big, uneaten pie that nobody's been looking at for a long time.
I've heard of another, I don't know a ton of people with startups. I know one other, my wife's, I guess it would be like my cousin-in-law, but one of her cousins' husband's is in a solar startup that's fairly new in Oklahoma. And I don't know what all they're doing. I know they're doing some residential. I don't know if they're doing commercial, but I know it's like pretty new. Like they just got it kicked off. So you're not the only person I've heard just recently. I feel like I've just been seeing more of it. I mean, obviously there's a push for renewable energy, and I just am seeing it pop up, and the cost thing makes sense. I'm just wondering in this state, like because of is it going to be harder, you think, to get like residential or first, well, maybe back up before I get into that. What are you guys chasing? What are you guys going for? Is it the entire market? Is it specializing in residential? Is it specializing in commercial, or just what can you talk to you guys are chasing?
So that's an excellent question. And there may not be an answer to it. So generally CED GreenTech on the West Coast, Arizona, Nevada, California, have been pretty heavy on residential and light, medium commercial. Yeah. We don't do much in the utility space, but Oklahoma is going to be a little bit different. And part of that is, it's just a different landscape here. And one thing that I've been looking pretty heavily into is actually crossover with the oil and gas sector. Yeah. And, there are a lot of things, and I never would have thought about it before I kind of got back into this and did the deep dive into solar. But between like the cathodic protection at the pipelines. There's I saw an article actually. It was Getka Group out of Tulsa announced on Earth Day that they were doing a 40 megawatt solar installation in Cushing for a data center and some kind of wellhead monitoring control situation and so really we're looking to at oil and gas off grid and also the grow houses are another thing. That's a big, obviously heavy on electricity usage.
Sure, especially during the summer when I bet
absolutely.
They have to keep those temp controlled too in the summer.
Well, yeah. So, and here's kind of the interesting thing about it. So, a grow room is like as energy dense as a data center roughly.
Really?
So unless you have a huge amount of land, your roof space is not going to cover it with solar panels. You're using way more electricity than that. So there are grow houses that have, gone solar on an indoor grow and covered maybe 25 to 50% at the very high end of their electricity usage.
Yeah.
But then I was approached by somebody here recently wanting to he's got a bunch of land apparently, and he's not near a utility connection. So he's wanting to do greenhouses. And that is something because you're not really doing light. You have some light on front and back end of it that you're basically doing like time of day control, but you're not actually needing to add light. So then you're just a couple hours of LEDs on, one end or the other. Yeah. And so we're looking at some kind of agricultural, oil and gas, more like off-grid applications that are not really a big part of our business elsewhere in GreenTech. So that's going to be kind of a unique to Oklahoma thing. But, it's one of those deals that...
It's a big business here. Right. I mean, there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm sure
absolutely.
And I bet it would be interesting to see... I have no idea whether anyone can find the stat, just what the power usage is for the grow operations here, because you're seeing them like all over the place. And this has become a huge...
something, right. I saw a statistic that said 1% of our national electrical consumption is grow houses.
For the nation?
For the nation, right, right. Yeah, it was mind-blowing amount of electricity, which, that's one of those things we need to, and that is something I've heard from OG&E, because we do a little bit. There's a rebate program that encourages people to, on the commercial side, to retrofit lighting, that kind of thing, to reduce, there's like wattage reduction. Sure. But they're kind of looking at the grow houses too, like what are the opportunities, because this is just a massive amount of electricity and nobody could have, foreseen the amount of medical marijuana that our state can grow or consume. So
I'm hearing about all the, we'll talk about this later, talk about Bitcoin a little bit because of its energy consumption, but you're hearing a lot of people bashed on that. I haven't hardly heard anything about the people ripping on you've heard a lot of negatives about medical marijuana, but not necessarily the power usage. That seems like a narrative that someone would have clung onto to have been like, oh, this is bad. I haven't really heard much about it.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I've seen a little bit about, the green impacts of the green industry. I saw some headline like that. Of course, I mean, the algorithms have me figured out. Anything solar or renewables or anything I'm getting pinged with. So
yeah, for sure. That's interesting. I like the off-grid. I mean, the thing that's cool to me about solar that's compelling is this just the off-grid, like prepper type aspect of it, like in theory, right? Like, I don't know, solar's got its issues around the sun doesn't always shine and it's night and day, obviously, and clouds and everything. But if you think about just this idea of being self-sufficient, distributed, decentralized, self-sufficient, it's like, it feels very futuristic and like I don't want to say dystopian because that's a negative connotation, but just kind of in this future world where everybody in theory you could like have your own power gen for like some operations. And I don't know that we're there all the way yet, but I've always thought solar was cool because of that aspect to it.
Speaking of that too, and this was, who knows if this is going to be a big seller, but I got these in the other day. I bought an Inverter Solar because the company that makes it. And they make some cool equipment, but one of the things unique about their machine is a lot of the companies have like basically a patented output voltage that only works. So we're seeing all these, it's kind of like an iPhone situation. We're seeing all these companies like Enphase, all their products, super user friendly, but they're made just to work with themselves. You need an Enphase battery within, Enphase connectors, Enphase everything. Well, Solar, theirs is like, no, we're going to output 48 voltage DC, which is old school. You can apocalypse comes, you can bust open the warehouse, get a bunch of golf cart batteries, string them up in a bank, but it works with everything. And so they've got that, and then they have an option that's EMP hardened.
What?
Right. And the salesman's telling me about this, and I'm like, wait a minute, what did you just say? I'm like, that could be really big here in Oklahoma. Like, I don't know if you know what we're like here, but
it's pretty. I bet there's more preppers here than people think.
Yeah,
right?
I'm like, that's really gonna like strike a chord with the prepper crowd.
Yeah,
but just as far, I mean, you mentioned distributed energy, and I do think there are a lot of pluses to distributed generation, just in general. I think which in the future I would. And that's one of those things. So I'm a solar guy, but I don't ever see like a world powered completely by solar.
Sure.
But I do think we would benefit a lot. I mean, at the national security level, just as far as just preventing blackouts and major failures, if we had like a distributed system of microgrids. If we had a bunch of microgrids that if the main grid failed and the microgrids could all function independently, I think that'd be an ideal situation. But I think we do that by anywhere that you have a good solar resource, let's develop it. Anywhere you have a good wind resource, develop it. And we use those power sources when we have them. The thing I like about natural gas, and I think they complement each other well, because natural gas power generation can be brought online pretty fast, quickly. Yeah, I've been told like 10 minutes. You can have a plant online, right?
So they have it to where your house can kick off. Like my business partner has one of the natural gas generators hooked up to his gas line, and when his power kicks off, he says it's like almost not immediate, but like just kicks on.
Oh, right.
Like
utility scale peak demand though. It's not like a coal plant. It's like a huge.
They can spool it up.
Right.
Get the turbine going.
Right. So I think natural gas pairs really well with renewables.
Yeah.
Like in my solar ideal world, I think we have a national network of natural gas pipelines, and then we have a bunch of microgrids that use whatever renewable resources available in that area, whether it's hydro, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, and then either you have like a actual home level standby, or maybe you have like a development. Like when we start developing neighborhoods, we develop in a microgrid.
That'd be sweet.
And then you have different batteries. You have people who wash their clothes at different times, but all of it's tied together. And that's another component of it is the like the control features and the smart features of everything. We've got to have a grid and individual components that all communicate with each other. It says, hey, Mary's battery's full and Susie's trying to wash her clothes. Like we trade we trade power back and forth for when different people need it. Right. And I think we can dramatically lower the overall power that we're using. And then, we've got natural got in Oklahoma. I feel like that's a resource that I really
have it a lot, all in the U.S. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure for it too.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I mean, I've been looking a lot into the off-grid power for natural gas and looked at it for Bitcoin mining and other things. And I've talked about it on this pod before, but I just think it's been interesting to me because it's relatively cheap, especially if you're not buying it off of. I mean, like if you really wanted to go futuristic, like compound style, you could just drill your own well. It's super cheap if you get it in the ground. There's a ton of reserves. Like once it gets on a pipeline and once you get to the market-based pricing, it's a little bit more expensive if you get it all the way to if you're getting top dollar for the gas. But if you actually just had like field level or like localized level gas, it's like pretty cheap. There's a lot of old gas fields around, especially this part of the world, Oklahoma, Texas, and these energy-producing states. Like in theory, there's towns in Oklahoma that have LDCs, like little local distribution companies that are just pulling gas off of wells and using it to power or use it for the gas for towns, like if it's pipeline quality gas. And so there are towns here in Oklahoma that are literally just pulling like pipeline quality gas off and using it primarily for utility gas, not for necessarily power gen, but throw some little mini power microgrid, a couple of that with some solar, and you've got almost this little self-sustaining community, which again, the grid's just relatively inefficient. I mean, I'm not an expert on the power markets, but the grid seems to be having, look at like Texas and California and now New York, after they just shut off this nuclear plant, they're having issues with brownouts and things. And so could we be in a world in the future where we have kind of these distributed systems? I think it's cool. I don't know that that's where it'll go, but I'm interested in it, especially for like industrial and oil field applications. Like you look at the oil field and could you put microgrids and power with natural gas out in some of these plays and use it for the lease power? Could you do these data centers, like not just Bitcoin mining, but like, Google built a big one up in Northeast Oklahoma. What if they put it in Southeast Oklahoma or in the Arkoma Basin where there's all that dry gas and like maybe, bought a gas field and just use that? They could probably have used a lot of the power for that data center. Probably would have been a combination. You probably could have hooked it to the grid, maybe had some solar, done natural gas generation, and it would have been pretty cheap, reliable, and probably greener than the grid. The grid's a little bit wasteful, right?
The grid is, there's a lot of transmission loss.
Yeah.
The greater the distance, the worse it is. And then there's just waste because, a lot of our generation is at kind of a constant base level, and then we have some peaker plants, that help out. But a lot of that electricity just gets wasted. It's like, the grid system is a big leaky bucket. We're running around as fast as we can, filling it up, know.
Right.
And it's just wasteful. But a lot of that comes into controls and monitoring, demand response, and all that. And really getting our power consumption down to a level where it can reasonably, and that's part of the problem, I think, is we have developed kind of like a gluttonous view towards, cause it's been so cheap and it's just been not a problem for so long. But now it's like, well, we could be a lot more efficient. We don't actually have to do it this way,
Right.
And just the Internet of Things and computers and all of that has just really, it's revolutionized energy, although it really hasn't been adopted to the extent that it should be.
Right. Well, it's just, it's fascinating to me. I've been forced to learn more about the power side of the equation, just across the different, I haven't had as many guests on as I want to in the power side. I'm going to try to get more into it. I've just been learning about it, especially with what happened with the February storm and all the stuff that was crazy with Texas and Oklahoma. And that obviously a lot of question marks around energy costs spiked. So it just forced me to, and there's a lot of failures on the grid. And so I've gone down that rabbit hole a lot. I need to have more guests on, but just learning about that is a very fascinating topic that just seems like you can go so much into that. And especially with renewables, and now you've got this volatility that's been introduced. So we've seen a lot of, again, decommissioning of the baseload, coal's been getting decommissioned. A lot of nat gas has come online, which is good. I think nat gas, like you mentioned earlier, for renewables, it's like the match made in heaven.
Yep.
If people will acknowledge, I know they want a fossil fuel free world, but reality is natural gas is clean. We have a lot of it. It can be transported easily. You can do things eventually in some future world like sequestration and get it net zero basically, but maybe not totally, but you can do a lot with that. And so then you look at people are shying away from nuclear. And so we're moving into this world where you have intermittent energy sources, which is going to cause volatility, which is going to cause inefficiencies. And it's just going to be, it just seems like it's getting less stable in some ways. So it's just a fascinating topic.
Yeah,
to me.
Absolutely. Going to that instability just makes me want to get off the grid.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. And maybe I'm broad brush over characterizing the themes, but I think some of that stuff's going on. So what about on the innovation side for solar? I know that there is battery storage is linked to it. We could talk about that for a little bit here in a minute. We can talk about some of the efficiency gains and the cost reductions. Maybe just speak, if you can, to what's some of the reasons these costs is has it been the tech that's gotten better? Is it just the costs that have gotten better? What's been driving it to that 90% number that you talked about? Just high level, what's kind of driving these themes?
A big part of it is, the technology's advanced a lot. And part of that's production methods. Just the way we get raw materials has been, of course, until COVID kind of completely messed up all of the supply chains. But the general trend.
How's that been?
It's rough, honestly, and a lot of it is the resins coming out of China, which go into all of the chips, PVC, lots of things. There's been a big shortage on that, and it's stuff like manufacturers place a limit on the amount that a distributor can buy, and then you start, and it ends up filtering all the way down, because then you have a limited amount. You have to maybe you change your price structure to help accommodate that, and then that cost ends up just kind of rolling downhill. Well, and you end up too, the manufacturer ends up with a limited run, and they're like, I get emails pretty much every single week. Oh, price increase, and it's out of control. But that's just across. That's autos. That's everything right now.
Yeah.
So with solar, But regarding efficiency. So I think it was the first solar cell was invented, I think, in 1883.
Really?
And it was 1% efficient, and it was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
About 1988, we were at 10% roughly, 10 to 15% efficiency. Now we're at 20 to 23 roughly, which is really impressive when you're talking about just converting the sunlight that hits the panel, converting it into electrical energy. Almost 25% of that is kind of mind-blowing to me. You look at it, and some people think this comparison's kind of funny, but a plant only converts sunlight into, stored chemical energy in the plant at a rate of like 0.5 to like 2%. So it's like, hey man, those guys have had millions of years to figure this out. And, we only had 100. We're doing pretty good.
Yeah. That's actually a pretty interesting comparison. That's crazy. So what's the physical limitation on efficiency? Does it ever butt up? You're never going to get to 100%, right? I mean,
Yeah. And,
is it getting close, or is it got a long way to run? So I've read some things
I think
that
it's
says
one of those things that
like,
we're starting to taper off a little bit. I think we had a ton of growth. I think that 1% to 25% in 100 years roughly, the technology's even been a dream of someone's that, I think that's pretty impressive. The real thing right now that is lagging behind is the battery, is the storage side of it. And everybody is on like the verge of releasing a new solid state battery, which is supposed to dramatically increase storage capability and cycle number of cycles that a battery can charge and discharge.
Right.
And that's supposed to be a game changer, but it's one of those things. Storage is a big problem. Now there are other you look into agricultural when you have more space. There's you can do micro hydro like kinetic energy battery, basically, where you have a tank full of water up high. Whenever your sun's shining,
right,
you pump water up into the tank, and then you slowly release it, and it goes down by like a micro hydro turbine, generates electricity, and then you can get a lot of.
Sorry,
no, you're good.
Just checking out something on the camera.
Yeah, a lot of storage out of that, and then I saw something kind of interesting. There are a lot of cool technologies. I saw it's a concrete flywheel.
Right.
And it's a company in France. Basically, it's a huge concrete disc. It weighs several tons. It's on like a basically nearly friction-free turntable.
Really?
And it sits underground. It's about the size of a storm shelter. Anyway, your solar, wind, whatever your renewable system is, turns this thing and then gets it spinning, and then they can hold up to like 7 kilowatt hours of energy, just this spinning block of concrete under your yard.
Wow.
And it's actually, it's an incredible technology, and it's like it requires very little, rare earth materials, nothing crazy. It's literally concrete. But then there's just a little clutch, and it's just like a regenerative braking system on a car. Just clutches onto that flywheel and starts generating electricity, again, when it's nighttime or cloudy or whatever. So there's some unique ideas out there. I think in the end, both on storage and generation, it's going to take a portfolio of many different technologies that make this work.
Right. Seems like it's going to be tough to be just batteries. Traditional batteries. It's just like, read some stat. I have no idea if this is true. I read it in a book. They said if you mine like all the lithium on the planet, it would still only hold like a day and a half of the entire Earth's energy.
I believe that.
But that's for everybody, right? Right. But makes you think, you're like, okay, well, that seems like it's going to be tough to do this at scale. So is it a combination? This same book, it was a book about energy, and he talked about how if you could do he was thinking like hydro, you could like pump water during peak times into reservoirs that were at higher elevation. Right. And then in non-peak times, like at night, you pump the water up into reservoirs, and then when it's peak times, you let the water out, and it's just a continual cycle. And when you let the water out, it creates power gen, and then use like nuclear basically like at night to pump it up. And then because nuclear is a good base load, and then they were saying nuclear combined with solar and wind, and then so during the peak times, the sun's shining in theory, and so you're using solar, and then you release the hydro and it flows down, and then at night when no one's really using, you use that nuclear power to pump the water back up and store it in a reservoir and use our natural reservoirs. And I was like that's mind blowing. I mean, I don't know that would work.
No,
it's just an interesting idea.
Work. Yeah, and that's, going back to the agricultural applications, that's something that you can, depending on the topography of your land, but you can do that with a large water tank. I mean, there are agricultural systems out there that there's a big water tank and it's a small, it's called a micro hydro turbine, but it's that exact concept. There's nothing, there's a few mechanical parts to that. Right. But there's nothing that really wears out there. It's just you have water, you pump it up, you let it back down, you pump it up, let it back down.
This guy was talking about it on in this book. He was talking about it filling up Lake Mead at huge scales.
But you can do that on huge scales.
Yeah,
that's
he's saying on huge scales. If you have large scale nuclear reactors and you could do it at night and use that energy to pump it up, and then during the day that nuclear wouldn't be enough to do the peak demand. Right. But that's when you would use the hydro and do that at a massive scale. And I was just I'd never really thought about it. It was really interesting.
Yeah, kind of similar concept in Europe. They have these basically large underground caverns that they pump air into, and they pump it up. It's like an enormous compressed air tank. And it's an energy storage, so they cap it off at really high pressure whenever they need it. They release air through a turbine. Yeah. And it's so it's a lot of creative people out there trying to figure it out. And
just like, how do you harness that kinetic energy? How do you harness that energy and then turn it into kinetic energy later on and like power something with it? Is pretty cool. It's an interesting topic. I think the technology on the storage side has to get there for some of these things to be larger applications to get to that. I mean, I don't know. Now it seems like it's cool and it can work for certain things, but to really get to industrial or like larger scale, you've got to figure out a way to efficiently store.
Right.
Batteries in general just seem, I don't want to say a dead end. Like, it seems like people have placed a lot of their hope on that, but there's a lot of chemicals involved. There's a lot of the recycling things an issue, the mining aspects an issue. Got to get creative, I think.
The big, at least, from where I see it right now, where we are with batteries, the usefulness of those, or at least I think their most useful purpose, is for like shaving applications. So if you have a utility that has variable peak rates, and so you say, hey, you've got a battery that you're going to charge whenever. I used to be on OG&E Smart Hours, and sometimes my electricity was 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Sometimes it was 20 cents.
Yeah.
When it was 20 cents, you can bet I was going around the house shutting everything off. I'm like, air conditioner's going off. It's going to warm up for about 2 hours, kids.
Yeah.
But then when it comes back on, it's like, it's back down to 4 cents or whatever. And I'm like, heck yeah, we're turning it down to 58.
Yeah, right.
And just, trying to bank that energy and saying it's going to stay cool all night, and I'm running it while it's cheap. Well, if you have that, you have some demand response, and so people can cooperate. Well, and we have the controls for this. The solar converter does that. When you can monitor when the electricity is cheap, charge your battery. Whenever it's high, you use your battery instead of getting power off the grid. Well, the utility kind of wants that because they're charging those high prices because they're trying to discourage people from using. Yeah. So if you have a bunch of people with batteries at like the end user level and they're using it for shaving, they're really, really useful and can cut down and basically just even out the grid demand.
Sure.
But as far as, and that's something that, so I was looking at what it would take to power my home on solar and have like complete battery backup to power my whole house. So right now you can get Fortress, it's a home battery company. They make it's one of the biggest ones out there. That's a single unit. It's 18 kilowatt hours, which is a big battery. Yeah. It weighs like 500 pounds. But this thing is, and it's one of the best. I mean, it's a great battery. But anyhow, my house, over the course of the year, I use about 33 kilowatt hours a day on average.
Yeah.
And so this battery is only half a day worth of electricity for me, and it's like a $12,000 battery.
$12,000?
Right.
Jeez.
Which, if you're in a market where you have that peak electricity thing, they can actually pay themselves back really fast. If you're in a market where electricity is a little bit more, in Oklahoma, it's one of those things that if you're trying to get off, if it's an off-grid cabin and you're running minimal stuff, or if I want to go down to like a backup panel where I'm only running a few things, the battery can definitely do that. And I could last a long time on that 18 kilowatt hours.
But here, the one thing I will say, though, that may be different a little bit versus some of these cheaper or the more expensive coastal states, like the temperatures, I don't know, they probably get pretty dang hot in some areas of California, but like here, it gets hot. Like there's sometimes my electric bill can go pretty high just because of the extreme heat. But I don't know if that, I mean, I know it's cheap, I guess is my point, but it can get, and like the thing that's interesting about that though is the days when it's super hot, that's the days when it's really sunny. So you would think that it would, and this gets into the conversation in the back half. I want to talk about Oklahoma specifically and some of the things, but I don't know, maybe with the battery stuff, it can make sense. I didn't mean to cut you off, so keep going on that.
You're good, yeah.
Half a day maybe with your full systems going?
Right. If I'm running my AC at full blast, doing all that. Yeah. So for me here in Oklahoma, with the kind of homes we build, again, we build bigger houses. We got big ranch houses, whatever. They're expensive to heat and cool. And that goes kind of back to the efficiency side of things. We've got a lot of efficiency technologies, building controls that can, make your HVAC management a little smarter. So there's a lot that goes, there's several like parts of the equation for, the energy crisis or whatever we want to call it, or just like the future of energy. What are we going to do? I think there's a lot of different answers and different components to it.
Yeah, for sure. It just seems like people are dumping a bunch of money into it. You look at where the investment dollars are going on our end. We talk to a lot of private equity investment. We talk a lot of people that usually would traditionally be pouring money into oil and gas, and now they're looking at these alternative technologies. I just, the battery side specifically, it seems like it is, I don't want to say the Wild West, but it seems like there's a lot of competing things that you hear about, like, oh, this technology, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but when I talk to people that are a little smarter than me, they're like, the jury's kind of out on which technology at least is going to be the one that, like you said earlier, they're always coming up with some new kind of thing, and I just don't know enough about it to even sound that smart or articulate about it, but it seems like a problem that has to be solved. These, like, for example, I know you said Fortress, there's like Tesla makes one. Is that comparable to the Fortress, like the Tesla, Tesla Powerwall or whatever?
Yeah, and that goes more into, where I was talking about those kind of proprietary technology companies. Tesla is one of those where their products kind of work with their products, and you get, Enphase is similar, which they're extremely user-friendly, easy to put together, and very quick, labor-saving. But they just don't have a lot of versatility as far as pairing them with other people's stuff, to put it simply, right?
Has it been difficult on supply chain with that stuff too, like battery stuff, like the power walls and things?
Yeah.
Is it just across the board?
Honestly, it's across the board. Like, we have problems getting steel, so we have like these little steel connectors, and they just connect electrical conduit. It's not a solar specific item. It's just all kinds of electrical conduit. We have these connectors. Well, we can't get those connectors because they're in a container in a port city that no one has found someone to unload for 3 months.
Wow.
So part of it is COVID problems, labor problems, issues at the ports, but it's affecting a lot of things. Now, there are some specifics with manufacturing, like the resins that I mentioned, and then also there's a recent issue, and President Biden introduced, there's going to be some regulation on sourcing the metallurgic silicon from certain area in China that's been using forced labor camps.
Right.
All this came to light, which, that was a huge company, a huge source for the solar industry.
I read it was like 90, I read like total 95%, or maybe that's not true, but 90 or some huge percent comes from areas that may be impacted by this, either directly or indirectly, because China kind of plays games with like what's actually... No companies are saying they're doing it,
right?
But if you kind of peel back the onion, you're like, but this company's affiliated over here, and it's all CCP, and it's like, is this really? How do we know? How can we track that supply chain? And I wanted to get into this a little bit, which is the social. We talked about, obviously solar's got the E part of it for ESG. There's the social part of it. I think this is a fairly new thing that is a talking point. I don't think people really were talking about this a year or two ago,
right?
Maybe a year ago, but it seems in the last couple of years, how's that going to impact things? And do companies like you guys, you starting to have to factor this in and be like, hey, we need to pay attention to this. We need to this is important. But how much ability do you even have? Just because so much of the supply chain is choke point at some of these areas.
Yeah. It's definitely an issue, and it's kind of a complicated situation. And the deal with there's been a lot going on with China and solar. So they've subsidized their solar manufacturing industry for a long time. So nobody's been able to compete with them
because they're government
decades.
Subsidizing
Right. So not only does their government subsidize it, but they allow them to use forced labor to produce things. So it's like, you can't beat them with that. But it's not a level playing field, and we shouldn't be supporting industries like that. Now, it came to light kind of recently. And it was, there was a panic for about a week, but then as we started talking to people, they said, well, we do have other supply, other options, other suppliers for this stuff. They're a little bit more expensive, but my next email is price increase. It's another one of those,
well, it's like, I don't know a lot about the solar history, but, I've heard that like Germany was really advanced, and then they started outsourcing it and kind of dropped the ball. They were a really early mover and a lot of that technology, and I don't know what the time frame was, 80s, 90s, some period decades ago, where Germany was making huge strides, and then they kind of got into the outsource trap and kind of slipped away and tried to cut costs like everybody else. Like, why does everybody outsource stuff? Try to cut costs, to try to drive costs down. And then I think COVID has really brought to light, take the social aspect of it aside. That's a tragic thing. It's not positive. No one wants forced labor for anything, but beyond that aspect of it, just the security around supply chain in general. And it's not just solar and the raw materials, it's look at what, like, we couldn't get medical stuff.
Right.
I mean, used to be in the medical field, and there was supply shortages on everything from N95 masks to, I mean, just all kinds of things. So I think that supply chain in general, as it relates to energy, but just as a whole, I don't know if it's ever been more in focus than it is right now in the world, given the backdrop of what's been happening this last year. It's kind of a wild time, just supply chain in general.
Yeah.
I mean, every bit, you're reading it all over. Like, I'm like on Twitter, and you read all about lots of businesses are being impacted right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Tons of people.
I mean, it's a funny time to try to open a new distribution location here in Oklahoma, because I was, writing POs, and, vendors are telling me, oh, we've got like a 26-week lead time, or there was one, I saw a request for a generator that the lead time was, it was like an order from May, and the lead time was April of next year.
And
it's like, wow. And it's like, yeah, it goes back to the computer chips, the resins, all this stuff. We just can't get it, can't make them. Yeah. So, it's wild. And so it is one of those things. It's like, I'm trying to open up a new shop. I've got a warehouse, all this space to put material, and I'm ordering things. And they're like, yeah, it's going to be like half a year.
Jeez.
I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So I can get things kind of piecemeal at a time, do the best I can. And then it's all finally, thankfully, come in, and we have like a full warehouse. We've got panels, inverters, racking, all that. But it was an ordeal to get stuff here. And now it's one of those games where our installers kind of have to look around, and they've been scrambling for 6 months now. It was before we got here, and there wasn't really a dedicated solar shop in Oklahoma. So they're getting stuff from Texas, ordering things online. And then, you're using like online retailers or distributors, there's not much service with that.
Yeah. Sure.
So you can have something that you've been able to get fine. One day they're like out of stock. You're not going to talk to somebody about that. It's not like having a local distributor. So I'm hoping that helps a little bit. And we've got a pretty good supply here, but I'm hoping it doesn't get worse. So I kind of came into this. I'm buying a lot of stuff. So I've kind of packed my warehouse full, because it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it on the next PO. It could be one of those that's like, you'll see it in 2 years. Yeah,
you don't want to lose a job or you lose a bid.
Right.
Can't get it in. It's I know it's impacting everybody, and it's just kind of this whole last year, without getting into I try not to get into the COVID stuff too much, because we all hear it every day. But man, it's changed so many industries, and the impact on, again, supply chain has been ripple effects. So, but we can move on from that. And I want to talk about the Oklahoma market. Then I want to talk about, I've got some stuff around Bitcoin mining. You and I have riffed on that before, just personally, and maybe there's not a lot there. We already talked about off-grid a minute ago, but it's always fun for me to bring up because I'm always interested in it. But just the Oklahoma market. So the main things you're going after, you said it's kind of TBD on what it is, but residential is obviously going to be there. Yep. Some of these, the grow houses. What's the selling point? What are the trade-offs? What are people struggling with? Are people going to have the storage to make it work? What are the payback periods and some of this stuff? Maybe that's too detailed. You don't know. But just the sales pitch in general, if it came to residential, commercial, whatever, maybe they're all so nuanced. That's too broad of a topic. But just talk a little bit about the Oklahoma market and how you see things kind of developing, what you guys are chasing and doing.
Yeah. So residential is going to be a big component of it. That's just our business, as a corporation is very residential focused on the solar. And that's just what the solar market does. You get to utility level, they're dealing more directly with manufacturers. Sure. So residential, light commercial, and then the two markets that I'm looking to, which is going to be kind of a little bit of a blue ocean, I think, is going to be the growers, particularly the greenhouse growers. Yeah. And just, kind of off-grid or, remote oil field. Mm-hmm. And most of that, a lot of it, from what I'm told, is kind of minimal electrical usage, like the impressed current for the cathodic protection. Not a lot of electricity required for that, but it needs to be there. Right, so it's that kind of thing, and then all the different telecommunications for monitoring, pipelines, all that. I think that'll be big here in Oklahoma, and that's something that we can kind of develop an expertise here and help out our other stores because oil and gas obviously is all over the country. We haven't been in a market, I don't think, that's been so focused on it that it made sense for us to really reach into that. But Oklahoma, it's just one of those things. I don't know how you'd be in Oklahoma without football or oil and gas, sure. So,
well, OU's going to be in the SEC, no longer in this part of the world.
I know,
What do you think about that?
That's a tough subject. I'm not. Which honestly, when Nebraska left a couple of years ago, I had just this sick feeling in my stomach that I was like, man, that's not good. Because that was as a kid, I remember a rivalry that we were pumped about. It's like, oh man, we're playing Nebraska. That was a big deal. And then when they left, it was like, wait a minute. I thought this was a for sure thing, guys. Like, I didn't know we were thinking about splitting the band up, you know? Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, in some ways it might be good for the conference. We get some kind of higher level competition, but at the same time, there's a lot of traditions that I'm kind of...
You could still play OSU if we wanted to every year or every other year.
Right,
they could still do it. You know,
if they have some control over that, it's like, look, I want to play OSU. I want to play Texas. Because honestly, I care about those local rivalries more than anything else.
I mean, who really cares? I mean, that's been there's a lot of OSU people that have been like, oh, the sky's falling. And I'm like, well, the rumor is we may go to the Big Ten. You know how many points we're going to score in the Big Ten? I'm just like, I'm actually kind of excited about maybe the different potentials of, I mean, the Big 12 has been a little bit of a wet noodle.
Right.
Kind of, you know, it's like, yeah, OU, Texas, but I don't know. We've been struggling.
Yeah.
It's a conference, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to get into sports and
It's
football.
a sad subject. I know.
I'm not as like upset about it as, some of the people that I've talked to for the OSU people, like sky is falling, like everything's going to fall apart. Our athletics are like academics are going to fail now. And I'm like, we're not even that highly ranked academics, like 180th in the country. I was like, we're not even like that high ranked. And I was like, and by the way, our athletics program is pretty good. Like the rumors are like either like OSU may be going Big Ten or actually, I think OSU is in a pretty good spot. Like we've done well in a lot of sports, and they're saying that we're the best position. And I'm like, yeah, look at these other jokers. What are like? You know, I'm just kidding. But I don't know if you make anyone mad. Like I have friends that are like Iowa State fans or whatever. What? But no, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I don't want to get too off the energy topic, but this is a podcast that's meant for rambling. But I think the SEC thing's a little bit of a trap for OU in Texas.
Well, that is something I am too.
I think you're going to be little fans. I think you're going to be little brothered over there. They're going to be like, "Oh, cool, you guys got second. Well, guess what? You're not making the playoff." Versus or like third or something. Like, I just think that like it's so political that you'll be in potentially second tier.
Oh yeah,
in SEC.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm an OU fan, so I think I can say this. But like, we're kind of spoiled.
You're the alpha dog. Like,
we have
year.
winning seasons every season, and we're always like, oh yeah, OU's can be one of the best in the conference, you know. But moving over to SEC, it's like, man, what if we have a season where we lose like more games than we win? Like, how are we gonna like deal with that? Are people even gonna want to go to the games anymore? We like to go see OU win. So
I don't even think it's gonna be like that. You'll have losing records. I think it's gonna be like you'll be a 1 or 2 loss team, and then you'll be going up against like a 1 or 2 loss like Alabama, LSU, some of these other schools that like have been in the conference and may be able to just. There's just a lot of politics involved.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, Alabama and OU have the same record. Who's going to go? It's not going to be OU. It's not going to be Texas. It's going to be Alabama.
Oh, that's a good point. Yep.
I mean, like, you won't get the tiebreaker ever.
Yeah.
If you're in the Big 12 and you have the same record, like, let's say you lose a couple games, go to the Big 12 championship, win, but you have the same record as, like, OSU, and we lost you in the championship game, but we have the same record, you're going. Guaranteed.
Right.
You're gonna get the benefit of a doubt always, and you're gonna get the benefit of a doubt over Pac-12 usually. OU or Texas does. You're gonna get the benefit of a doubt over some of these other conferences. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just think that OU and Texas have it really, 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 really good in the Big 12.
I know.
And I think if you're tied with some of these other SEC schools, I don't think you're gonna win that tiebreaker, and it could end up looking a couple decades back and being like, this really destroyed our program potentially, or like made it a lot harder for you to get to these big name games because they're going to pick LSU or Alabama or somebody over you.
Right.
I don't know. That would be, I feel like it's kind of a trap.
I share the concern. I really do.
I feel like it's kind of a trap. I don't know how this
I liked my small pond, honestly. Like,
yeah. It's like, I want to be the alpha all the time. So we digress into football. I'm sure there's a lot of Big 12 or SEC people listening to this, but they don't care. Maybe. I know a lot of oil and gas people and energy people are in that sphere. But switching over, like this Bitcoin mining, you and I have talked about it. Like, and that kind of plays into this off-grid thing. Is solar really applicable? Can you really get the type of power that you need? I mean, I know a lot of Bitcoin mining guys, and they're saying that it's just not reliable enough. Maybe it can be part of the mix, but have you seen anybody doing it for that application or these like data center, like heavy usage applications, or is that not something that
I have not seen
Any crypto type
I
stuff?
haven't seen like a solar farm that's solely purpose built for crypto mining. What I have wondered, and I kind of got this from you in your the crypto episode, but I kind of wonder. So I'm looking at disconnecting from OG&E just theoretically in my head.
Right.
It's like I want to oversize my solar system significantly.
Right.
I want to have a natural gas standby generator, right?
Yeah.
And then a little bit of battery backup. With that system, what I foresee being able to do is saying most of the time I have plenty of solar power anytime the sun's shining, even if it's not shining, if it's bright outside, even if it's overcast. I've oversized enough that I'm going to get a good amount of electricity. I may not run my dryer on it, my electric dryer, and my dishwasher.
You might have a couple S9s
Something
plugged
like
in.
Well, what I'm saying is if you had an option where I'm overproducing, my battery's full, and now I have excess electricity, well, maybe I could run a couple of S19s on it.
Yeah.
And then just any time, because then at that point I'm saying I've got free electricity.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter how efficient the miner is at this point. I'll either get more coin or less coin, but my electricity at that point is free. And when you get into, depending
it's kind of like
utility,
a battery in some ways. I mean, it's like a battery. You're storing the value.
Well, and what I'm thinking in my head is that extra solar energy I'll store in my crypto bank. And whenever I need to fire up my natural gas generator, when I get that bill, I've got my crypto.
Yeah.
And I pay for it. It's the crypto battery. I love the concept. It was mind blowing to me when you first introduced it.
Yeah.
And I love it even more every day.
It's a cool concept. I mean, maybe in S19s or power, I don't know. I'm not an expert in the mining, but you could even do like an S9 or something that's maybe a little less, power intensive. I don't know how it all works, but maybe they're just less efficient. I don't know if they're less power intensive.
And to that may be the thing that needs to be on a microgrid scale. Maybe you build a several hundred home community. You have a bunch of solar deployed. You have, whatever renewable resources you have. And then you have a backup natural gas, that's plugged in to the pipeline. And anytime you guys have extra solar or whatever, or maybe you've got your natural gas power running and you have a little bit extra, well, that goes in the crypto mine and boom, nobody's got HOA fees because you guys have, your association is mining crypto.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of options, and it's better than selling it back to the utility because they're, in a lot of cases, it depends. Some people have good net metering policies, but most of the time, if you're just selling it back to the utility, you're not going to get a good deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're maintaining the grid. I mean, they're doing stuff that they do need to get money for. But
to be fair,
I'd rather keep it and get some Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. You're a bit of a investor in some different things. You still playing the GameStop?
I'm riding that GameStop
hard.
GameStop
still.
I'm holding to the grave, man. Which right now, I mean, because I got in. It was kind of a funny story. My first GameStop share, I bought it 360, 360 and some change.
Yeah.
And then, it kind of started crashing, and then it got down at some point. He was in like the 45s, and I had bought a few more. That first one was 360, then I bought some at like 280, kind of rode that down, averaged down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I got to this point where I'd put like, $2,700 into it. Not a lot of money, but enough that you don't want to just lose it, right?
Yeah, right.
So I get down to this point, it's gone from 360 to $40. And I'm like, so I either have to admit that I'm an absolute idiot.
You sent some text showing like the losses, but you were like, I can't remember. You sent it to the group text. You're like something like double down or whatever.
Double down, yeah.
And I was like, sell.
Much more than
I was like,
double down.
sell, bro.
Yeah.
I was like, sell now. But you were right. Yeah.
I bought in hard at 40, and I'm like, and it came down to my pride because I'm like, I really will have to admit to myself that I'm a complete idiot.
Yeah.
Or this is a great deal if I'm going to buy a bunch more of them. And so I'm like, I'm going to have some confidence in myself and say I'm not a complete idiot. So I bought a lot more GameStop, and I averaged down just under $100 a share, I think. And, now we're sitting at about, it's a wild ride, man.
Yeah.
It's been a roller coaster. Definitely made me grow up a little bit is the best way to put it. But
I've been in GameStop, and it's sad, man. Like, I don't believe it.
The retail locations?
Yes, they're just like, I don't know how they're
see
online.
some of the ones they've redone.
Are they nice?
Yeah, so they've been buying up like Amazon type fulfillment centers, right?
Really?
All their brick and mortar locations, they're like they're redoing them. It's not going to be like a store anymore. Like there may be some distribution function to it, but it's like a place for gamers to go, have tournaments, really? Like a social area. Yeah, it's basically going to be like a gaming club. And it's not a brick and mortar anymore. It's an e-tailer with like this big like kind of social component of getting together, trying stuff, demoing things, getting together with.
They have to do that. People. They have to couple that with. They should definitely ride the streaming wave if they haven't. They got to figure out how to get into the streaming, Twitch streaming, gaming, like tournaments.
Well, and they're getting into the esports now too.
That's what I'm saying.
So
like
that's
esports,
they've got this the whole GameStop NFT getting into the NFT realm. It's real mysterious. Nobody knows what's going on. But and there's some talk too. There's some using the blockchain, you could theoretically buy electronic games and resell them utilizing the blockchain. I don't know how that and so work. It adds in this component, and that's something that gamers like hard copies because you play a game. When you really for the hardcore gamer, if you finish a game, you're kind of done with it. And because
the games have like a private key or something, and they're like recorded on the blockchain, and then you
can, you can sell the game back to GameStop, right? And then maybe we completely get rid of hard copies, but I don't know that. I think for how immersive the games are and how much data there is, I think it's going to be hard to have a high quality game completely streamed and not be either downloaded onto a hard disk or
maybe I mean like broadband is getting. I've heard things that broadband is getting a lot better and like what they're trying to do, like the speeds, but
it's just one of those things. It's the rate of technology.
The problem is games are getting better too.
Right,
so
they're getting better and faster too. And who wants to slow that down?
Like the games really need to get that much better. Like I feel like at some point, like I play a lot of Nintendo Switch, and I'm like the graphics aren't like the most mind blowing. Like I kind of forgot that PS5 came out. Like at first I was like, I kind of want. Like I don't game that much anymore. I'm too busy editing podcasts nowadays. But when it first came out, I was like, oh, I kind of want that for like a day, and then like I forgot about it. And then like I play like Switch with my kids. Like we play like Mario and stuff. Like the classic Nintendo games. And then like the other day it hit me. I was like, oh yeah, there's like a new generation of consoles out, and I just don't feel FOMO about it at all. Like,
right.
Because it's like at some point, how real do you really need it to look? And I could see like the streaming thing panning out because I think that like people might take a trade off between graphics and convenience and just good gameplay. I don't know.
Maybe we'll see.
GameStop though. My brother and I riffed on it one time on a fake pod that we never released, but we just were both saying that it just seems like one time I went in there and there was just like no inventory. It's like I used to go in there and the like used game inventory is where it popped. Like you would be like, I want to get me like an old like I don't know some game that like you never bought when it was new. You could go in there and get used, and they used to have like a lot of good like just inventory of things. But nowadays, like I went in there last time I went in there, I was like, this is kind of sad. I was like, there's nothing in here. There's like dusty shelves and
Now you're seeing it before the wind down. A bunch of stores they closed.
Yeah,
and then they're keeping around the ones that are going to be these like social gaming centers, man.
Yeah.
It's the future of gaming. GameStop,
double down, dude. So to end it, let's. Why is your company? If somebody's thinking about solar, like why do I need to go with you guys? Like let's put a plug in. So what are you guys going to do to help them out and to make their experience better and to get them what they need, get them taken care of?
So number one, right now we're the only dedicated solar supplier in the state of Oklahoma. So having actual inventory here on the ground is a huge deal right now. Supply chains. We kind of sell ourselves on the service component of our business. Service, integrity, reliability are like our three, words. But anyhow, it's what our goal is our installers, they have their deal that's installing solar panels, getting them integrated into the system. What I want to do is make sure that they're never waiting on a part, that they are not ever waiting on anything, that we can kind of anticipate their needs a little bit. We have something called the it's kind of an inventory management program, VMI, and vendor managed inventory is what it stands for. But basically our customers, they have a little shop out in their warehouse. We've got QR codes on the shelves. They can go through, scan them, automatically puts together an order, sends it to me. I can deliver it whenever you want it. I mean, right now we have a couple of customers that we're kind of focused on. It's kind of a Jerry Maguire situation. They're getting absolute level service, And that's what it is. It's being there for our customers so that they can focus on their job.
Sure.
And the supply chains are messed up right now, so it helps to have somebody who is basically dedicated to managing your supply chain. Yeah. Right. And then, they don't have to keep a bunch of inventory on hand. It's like you can keep 1 week because I can schedule a stop at your shop every week. You pick the day. So it's just that it's the service of it. And, a lot of these smaller guys, electricians who are just wanting to get into solar a little bit, maybe they don't have a big shop space, and the inventory takes them. I mean, the solar panels are like 4 foot by 6 foot. They're large. So you got to have some space to store that stuff. So just being able to operate and not have to manage your own warehouse. So
that's a big deal.
And of course we negotiate special purchase agreements with vendors and whatnot and that kind of thing. There's a lot that goes into it, but it's just getting the product to them and making sure they can stay busy doing their job, and we'll do ours, and hopefully we, get it all done.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting. I think it's cool. When you told me you're in it, you're doing this, I immediately perked up because I know I was in the podcast. I was like, I tried to get Jay to come on because he's doing the geothermal thing.
Oh, yeah.
And he probably won't listen to this, but I was like, come on, do the pod. He's like, I'm brand new at this. He's like, I got to get a little bit. He hadn't done his first. He was like, it was in the middle of COVID, so it was hard for him to get his first well. But I think he's traveled international down and done some big projects on the geothermal side.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to have this theme where I like hanging out with my friends, and I like doing the media stuff, like the vlog thing, and then the podcasts and stuff. And I will bring up Joe Rogan, even though it's really cliche. I say that every time. But he has his friends on all the time.
Right.
And I'm always like, that just looks fun. Like, have your friends on. And I also am conflicted around having to always do energy stuff because sometimes it's fun to talk about GameStop and OU football.
Right, yeah.
And whatever, the other stuff that we want to talk about. So when I can combine those worlds and have a friend on and BS about just other stuff and hang out and have the chemistry of having a buddy to come on. And then when I heard you were going to be the energy side, I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm going to get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to get Levi on. And you're somebody that I see pretty frequently because we have kids similar age and we get to hang out. We do the Dad-urdays.
Oh, yeah.
So that's fun. And I'm glad that you got to come on, man. And I appreciate you carving out the time and doing this.
It's been a blast,
it's good stuff. All right, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, I'm a big fan of the show.
Yeah, man.
Exciting to be on here.
All right. Appreciate it.